Caitlin Elizabeth Clark. We all know that she is the WNBA. She is women's basketball. A lot of people hate that, but it doesn't make it any less true. The logo threes. I mean, just look at her college career, right? The logo threes that drew everyone in, that got everyone's attention. It's still a big deal and it still gets people very, very excited. It's like a home run in baseball, or I don't know, maybe the equivalent of a dunk in the NBA, because let's face it, unless it's a very, very special dunk, maybe in traffic over a player a regular old dunk in the NBA doesn't get everyone all that excited anymore. The back-to-back title runs in the tournament. By the way, each season beating the defending champs along the way, including in 2023, I think. Yeah, in 2023, beating the defending champion and at the time in the tournament undefeated South Carolina Gamecocks before falling eventually to LSU in the title game, and then next year beating the defending champion LSU team in the tournament on the way to yet another title game. The NCAA scoring record, among others, right? The massive TV ratings for that tournament, which, oh man, I didn't prep them for this. I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say, I mean, I know she was beating out the men's tournament. I forget the biggest number. I want to say 24 million, but maybe, yeah, I think, right? Was it 24 million? I think it was 24 plus, 18 plus for a game, right? The 55,000 in attendance for the outdoor game that she played as well. Just insane what she accomplished in college and what she did in terms of bringing new fans to women's basketball. And then that carried over, of course, to the WNBA. She brought her fans with her. And that rookie year, are you kidding me? It was a storybook year. Didn't start out that way. Would they start out 2-9, I believe, with that insane schedule at the beginning of the season, a lot going against her. We had the whole and Angel Reese, all of that, but just Caitlin Clark on the basketball court, 60 some plus records, including major ones, right? Assists in a season, assists in a game with 19. I think she was one short of the record in the All-Star game where she actually refused to go back in because Enrique couldn't miss. She was unconscious, and Caitlin Clark was like, "Nah, that record's not that important to me. Let Enrique cook." By the way, that type of stuff, who Caitlin Clark is as a person, not talked about nearly enough, right? We had the triple doubles, which I think she got two of them, and we know she was close to some others when it had never been done before by a rookie. Fourth in MVP voting, rookie of the year. I think she was set a rookie record for most made threes in a season, and I believe she was what, one or two short. She was really close to the record in and of itself by Diana Taurasi at the time, and of course what she did for viewership and for ratings as well. The WNBA had spent almost 3 decades of being completely irrelevant, of no one caring, of no one even realizing the league was still going. Now, that being said, to be fair, the first few seasons, the WNBA did very well in terms of ratings because they had this insane media push. They had Cheryl Swoops getting her sneaker, and they had Michael Jordan doing publicity and marketing and appearances with Cheryl Swoops, tying Cheryl Swoops, the female Jordan and so forth. And the ratings were impressive early on for the first few seasons. Unfortunately, the good feelings didn't stay that well because people they stayed long enough to realize, you know what, the product's simply not that good. It's not enjoyable, it's not entertaining. They left and they never came back. And then, man, and to get into that again with the ratings and all of that, right? I think it was hold on, I have his name here. I think I have this right. Ryan Brewer, and I believe other people have done, some other work since, but I think this was kind of the first big one that everyone talked about. He was a finance professor at Indiana University at Columbus, who was a valuation specialist. And he calculated that Caitlin Clark alone accounted for more than a quarter. His number was actually 26.5%, but more than a quarter of all WNBA economic activity in 2024. Think about that. Think about how insane that is for a professional sports league to have one single player account for over a quarter of the economic activity for the entire freaking league. Now, of course, that meant, we're talking about attendance, we're talking about television ratings, we're talking about merchandise. It was, now there's some, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't gone back and looked in a while, but it was something like 24, 25 WNBA games that drew at least a million viewers. Caitlin Clark, I think there were only three that did not involve Caitlin Clark, but two of them were games that were either lead-ins to Caitlin Clark or the game following Caitlin Clark. So it was still a huge part of the Caitlin Clark effect. Her games averaged roughly, I think, 1.2 million viewers, which was about, what, 200% more than games she did not play. Think about that, 200%, not 100%. So not double, more like triple. Okay, and that includes, by the way, Caitlin Clark games being on places like NBA TV, which she set a record for. And I think the highest viewed game on NBA TV was 600 and some thousand, but that was a record for NBA TV because obviously not everyone has it and so forth. So you get that as well. So that 1.2 number is brought down by things like that. It'd be really interesting. I didn't think to do it before I started this video of going and checking, okay, well, what did she do? What was the average on the games that were on, well, they weren't on USA Network, but ESPN, ABC, CBS, things like that, right? The type of networks that you get for other sports, for other major sports. Obviously, there was the insane attendance record. Indiana set a single season league attendance record, but they also set the home and away. And remember, that was a 40 game season in 2024, and they set that record in 26 games. Do we need to talk about, by the way, not sponsored? So, YouTube, please don't get rid of me. I just happened to be drinking this because I knew this was going to be a long one and, my throat. Apologies. I know someone's going to say, well, that's not going to do it. It's water. Yes, but I need the caffeine too. So, we had, because it was big news, right? All the opponents relocating the home games into larger NBA arenas, all the records set in games against the Mystics, games against the Atlanta Dream. Hey, even games in Vegas were records with Caitlin Clark, even though Vegas didn't play in a tiny little arena like, say, Dallas and Atlanta and Washington and so forth that were playing in, 4, 5, 6,000 seaters. And then merchandise sales, of course, surged something like 600%. And we all know Caitlin Clark not only topped that, and we never saw the breakdown. I would love to see Caitlin Clark and then the second WNBA player, because Caitlin Clark is the only one on that list when you include the NBA, right? Which is absolutely insane. She's a top selling jersey, even when you include the NBA players. And then, hey, what did we find out about that was finalized as well? And I know it had been in the works for a while, but it was still pretty impressive timing that the media rights deal got signed when Caitlin Clark got into the league, which was, and I think it's more now, right? There were little bits because it was part of the media rights deal that there could be these other things that could get added separately that were being worked on. So it was signed 11 years, 2.2 billion. And I believe it's a little higher now because of some other things. But that was like four times, maybe a little more than four times what it had been previously. I think it was in the 50, $60 million range. And then it's what, 200 and some million per year. Big difference. Um, And then hold on, let me just check. Yeah, I have here 11-year, 2.2 billion. Again, that was initial. That was initial. And I want to make sure I have this right because this is wild too. Um, it's estimated that roughly one in every six tickets sold league wide, home and away, are owed to the Caitlin Clark effect. That's so freaking insane. And yet, here's where we get into some of the frustrating stuff because we've seen time and time again, both by the actions of the WNBA and the inactions of the WNBA, that they despise Caitlin Clark. It is one of the most baffling, frustrating, annoying, angering things I have ever seen in sports. Staying back in 2024, right? We had the Olympic snub. And, I know you get people like Stephen A. Smith like, oh, for marketing, for growing the game, she should have been on the team. And no, I'm going to stick with because I did multiple videos at the time. You can go back and find them. I broke down what Caitlin Clark had done just in her little time in the WNBA. And as we know, tough start for the Indiana Fever, but also she needs to be judged by college. I mean, we know at the time she was the NCAA all-time scoring leader. We know that she led the U19 team not that long ago to a World Cup gold medal for which she was MVP. One of the things I broke down at the time and went into detail was what I call points per shot. That to me is a look, no stat is the be all end all for anybody, but when you get into, I won't say shooting efficiency, scoring efficiency, because it factors in free throws and free throws attempted. So both how often can you get to the line? And we know Caitlin Clark has no whistle, right? So this is a kind of a disadvantage for her, but it factors in your shooting from two. You're shooting from three, and also your ability to get to the line and make free throws. So it's similar to total shooting percentage, but not exactly. And that's what's called points per shot. So it's the total number of points a player has scored divided by their field goal attempts, right? Because that takes care of the twos and the threes, but it also takes care of how many points are you getting from the line as well, which again, right, doesn't factor into a field goal attempt. So someone like Asia Wilson should be pretty good. And I believe in breaking it all down, Caitlin Clark was, I think Asia Wilson might have been the only person ahead of Caitlin Clark in her little time in the WNBA at that time who had a better points per shot number. I know none of the guards, and some of the guards weren't even close, right? So Caitlin Clark, actually, when you consider the difficulty level of her shots and how she's guarded, she doesn't get nearly enough credit for actually being a damn efficient scorer. Okay, absolutely snubbed by the Olympics. We can get into all the records that Caitlin Clark's mentioned, right? Which I kind of just went through. I won't go into all the details again. So what is going on with the WNBA? When you look at all of this, the league basically got everything it could ever imagine to ask for packaged up in Caitlin Clark. And then we see how they've treated her. And we've seen how the players treated her. And we've seen how the media has treated her. And you're like, what what is happening? This doesn't make sense to a rational person. This doesn't make sense to a normal person from the outside. Someone who started watching women's basketball, for example, because of Caitlin Clark. And you come into this, and it is simply shocking to see what has been going on and to see how she's been treated. So the obvious question is why? Why is Caitlin Clark treated this way? And it makes you ask the follow up, is the WNBA actually about basketball or is it about something else? Now, when it comes to on the court, right? We saw it from day one in 2024. We know all about the physical abuse of Caitlin Clark on the court. We all know about the flagrant fouls. We all know about the dirty plays, the cheap shots, right? I think she was what? 18% of all flagrant fouls in 2024 were committed against Caitlin Clark. And that, of course, don't forget, is just the ones that were called. There were a whole lot of flagrants that weren't not only weren't called flagrants, they weren't called fouls, but we can look at the obvious ones, right? There was Kennedy Carter. And even that, by the way, only called a regular foul. Dead ball. Caitlin Clark is just standing there waiting for the game to get started, and Kennedy Carter charges her from behind and slams into her back, knocking it to the ground. The official is standing right there, and it was called a regular foul. Now, yes, it got upgraded after the fact, but that is a great example of the problem with the WNBA and their treatment of Caitlin Clark because in no universe could an official be standing right there, watch that happen a foot in front of them, call that a regular foul, not review it, unless that official has an agenda. That's the only possible way it happens. Of course, we know there was also Diamond DeShields, there was Dejanay Carrington. You know, we had last year, if we want to get into last year, we had Marina Mabry, JC Sheldon, Alyssa Thomas every season, multiple times with hits, and we could go on and on. So we know how a lot of these players treated her during games. And like I just mentioned, Carter was given a common foul. Mabry was not tossed out of the game last year when she did what she did. Many things are not called at all. Nothing was called on Thomas for this most recent brouhaha during the game. Not even a regular foul. I believe four, I want to say five, but I think four flagrant fouls. Correct me if I'm wrong. If it's four or five flagrant fouls called against the Chicago Sky in 2024 against Caitlin Clark alone. That's an insane amount of violence concentrated on one player from one team. Absolutely wild. And the WNBA never once stepped in to make an example of a player. So y'all to let everyone know, hey, Caitlin Clark is our Michael Jordan. We are not going to allow the officials to call her differently in terms of favoring her, but we're not going to go the other way either. You are not going to be allowed to punish her in this manner, but the league never, ever did that. Now, we can set aside whether the physical attacks from players were deliberate, the hard. Now, obviously, some of them are, right? Mabry, Carrington, Sheldon, Carter, clearly deliberate. I think a lot of the ones, these hits to the head on drives to the basket, I think all deliberate. But you can make arguments on some of them whether they're just like hard fouls, and then they get away with them not being called at all when the players might even expect them, but they're going to get the most out of their foul. But what is really concerning goes back to what I just said, and that is the lack of action from the league. The lack of the league taking a stand, making a statement, and really making an example out of a player to let all of the other players know you're not going to do this. You are not going to take our golden goose and end her career because you're jealous, because you don't like the fact that she's popular and we finally have a popular player in the WNBA and it's not you. It's absolutely insane, right? We've got things like I said, Carter's the most obvious example, but we know there's a lot more things that aren't called at all during games. Slaps on the wrist, if anything, after the fact, right? Kennedy Carter getting a flagrant one slap on the wrist. It doesn't do anything. Even Alyssa Thomas getting a flagrant two after the fact doesn't do anything. Now, Alyssa Thomas, and I said this when it happened, and then Christine Brennan said it as well, 10 games, that says something. That says something. That's almost a quarter of the season. Now, that should have been done in 2024. Imagine how differently things might have been going not just in benefit of Caitlin Clark, but benefit of the entire league. I mean, could you imagine if Kennedy Carter had been given 10 games? Now, everyone would have yelled and the WNBA old guard would have yelled and screamed and pissed and moaned and all of that. But it absolutely would have had an impact on the court in terms of how the players treated Caitlin Clark. But there's been no real consequence for any of these players who are out there trying to end Caitlin Clark's career. The one player in the league that they've ever had that has gotten fans to tune in consistently and watched. So it's obvious the WNBA, no interest whatsoever in protecting the only player they have ever had who has made the league relevant. What does that say about the WNBA? Now, let's flip it. What about the consequences when it comes to Caitlin Clark's behavior? Because we've seen that as well. Now, first of all, let's talk about more recent real quick because we got the whole freedom of movement stuff, right? She doesn't get those calls. Is she in general maybe getting more calls this year? I think she might be. Yes, I mean, I can admit to that, but to say that she gets the freedom of movement calls that other players are getting, because like fouls are up dramatically around the league, and I think that's just the whole focus of freedom of movement. But she's not getting them like other players. And then the flip side of that is how she's being called defensively. This is a player who has never been prone to foul trouble, who doesn't get a lot of fouls called against her and never has. And now all of a sudden, every single game she's in foul trouble. And if you go to the film for many of these, she's not even making any contact at all. Now, if we go back to another thing that we've seen from 2024, the technical fouls, right? We can go to 2024 and the hypocrisy, right? That's the other thing, which again makes you question what is it the WNBA is trying to do? You had Caitlin Clark slapping the stanchion and gets a technical foul for it when she was frustrated for a play she didn't make. It had nothing to do with the call. Diana Taurasi then does the same thing. She gets a technical, which was her seventh, which should have suspended her, and the league rescinds it. This year, Caitlin Clark gets a technical foul for clapping. Paige Beckers gets a technical foul for clapping, and it gets rescinded. I just saw a video recently with Natasha Cloud actually clapping out at the official right in her face. Nothing. Paige Beckers again going out and making it very clear and doing the clapping at an official. Nothing. And again, with Caitlin Clark actually asked for clarification on that one technical, and she was literally told that it was for clapping. Absolutely wild. So keep in mind, a fist to the throat. And I did another video. I think it's up already. I did one as a great video on a former 76ers head team doctor talking about the treatment of Caitlin Clark on the court. If you haven't seen that video and it is up, check it out. If it's not up yet, be on the lookout for it because I think it's a really, really good video that talks about this and especially about that danger. But a fist to the throat is fine if it's to Caitlin Clark's throat. Caitlin Clark clapping, not fine. A great example of what Caitlin Clark did for the league is, of course, I mean, you can see it in the All-Star numbers. You could see it in the first season where, it's like the first two or three players, I think, had more votes than the entire league had the previous season, right? And then it went up last year, right? Caitlin Clark drew almost 1.3 million All-Star votes, which was, of course, a single season record. I think she was, I want to say second, but I think she was actually third in the media voting. And then, hey, guess where her fellow players ranked her, folks? Guess where the fellow players ranked her? Ninth among guards. The public knows they're witnessing a generational talent. A large percentage of her peers, the players who play her, are so emotional, so petty, so jealous, so envious of Caitlin Clark that they can't even acknowledge how good she is. That's insane because let's be clear, because no one can make the argument, oh, well, she's just popular and the fans don't know. It's the players who would know. Well, then, of course, I would bring to you, and again, actions, words. Look how the players guard Caitlin Clark. They guard her like a generational talent. They guard her like no other player in the league has ever been guarded before. It is completely contradictory to how they vote her in the for the All-Star game. Completely contradictory. It was so damn absurd. Even the legendary Dick Vitale himself called out the players at the time and said that their vote was absolutely pure jealousy. That is what the players gave you. And we know we got that this year too, where Caitlin Clark is having a better year than her rookie year. By the way, despite playing 15 to 20% less because Stephanie White is trying to limit her numbers, Caitlin Clark is having a better season than she did in 2024. This league has been built, and Stephanie White made this clear the other day. It's not about basketball. This league is about activism. This league is about checking boxes. This league is about victimhood. This league is about their social clubs. They loved. Now, they wanted more money because, of course, who doesn't? But they loved the fact that they could play in front of a few people in small gyms because it was always about humping, not hooping. It was always about activism. It was always about their little social gatherings, and they just had the NBA foot the bill, and they had to go through the motions of basketball games in order to make all of that happen. But now, with Caitlin Clark, with its biggest draw being a straight, not very tan woman who brought in actual basketball fans, the light is the disinfectant, and the rest of the players hate it. And they hate Caitlin Clark for bringing that attention to the league. They hate Caitlin Clark for bringing the fans to the league because now you have a lot of people who say, what the heck is this? This isn't a basketball league. What have we got going on? And the players hate Caitlin Clark for that. They blame Caitlin Clark. It is a tribal thing. And Caitlin Clark, nor her fans, are part of that tribe, and they resent her for it. And they hate all of you. They hate all of us for it. And all of that jealousy, all of that envy, all of that resentment, all of that hate, all of that bigotry, it comes out in the physical attacks on the court because the players have figured out the league is not going to back Caitlin Clark. The league is not going to protect Caitlin Clark. Therefore, she is fair game, and they can go out and they can grab and they can clutch and they can throw elbows and they can hit her in the head when she drives to the basket, and they will not be punished for it. It is absolutely insane that this is going on in a professional sports league. It is clear the WNBA has put out the signal they are not going to protect Caitlin Clark. And look, man, sports have risk. We all know that. Walking out your front door has a risk. We all know that. But within those risks in a sport, it is a league and a team's duty, first and foremost, to protect those players as best as they possibly can. The WNBA clearly not protecting Caitlin Clark. And they've made clear in their actions and in their lack of action that they don't want to, and they have no intention to protect Caitlin Clark. Kathy Engelbert, to me, now, just from everything I've seen, from everything I've known, obviously this is a guess, I guess educated guess based on what I've seen. I think Kathy Engelbert would like to dial all this back and protect Caitlin Clark and take full advantage of what she brings to the WNBA. But Kathy Engelbert is afraid of the players in the WNBA. As crazy as that sounds, being the commissioner, she is afraid of those players. Therefore, she just allows this to go on and she makes little overtures here and there, like giving Alyssa Thomas the flagrant 2. And we all know that the league, while using Caitlin Clark to get the new CBA and to grow, it also does its best to minimize and limit the promotion of Caitlin Clark. So clearly, they are not concerned with what matters most, which is growing the league and turning a profit, because that's how you allow players to get everything they say they want. You have to grow the league and you have to make money. And the WNBA, if it wanted to do that, would change everything they've done the past 2+ years when it comes to Caitlin Clark. I mean, they spent almost 3 decades in irrelevancy, and then they were handed the greatest gift this struggling league could ever receive. And a lot of people want to talk about her impact like Michael Jordan. And I've said that many times. And then I started thinking about it and said, you know what? Her impact on the league actually greater than Michael Jordan's. And we could go back to the, 26.5% of the economic activity in 2024 for the WNBA was a single player. Even Jordan did not have that kind of impact. Sold out arenas, baby. Rock star. Bigger arenas and sold out arenas. Rock star. Massive TV ratings. Again, it just hit me. One of the things I didn't mention from the beginning of the video when I was talking about that, all those million+ view games in 2024, the WNBA had not had one single million viewer game since Candace Parker's rookie game in 2008. So the very first game of 2008 until Caitlin Clark in 2024, not a single WNBA game hit 1 million viewers. But instead of patting Caitlin Clark on the back, instead of embracing Caitlin Clark, instead of thanking Caitlin Clark for what she's done. And again, I am not asking for special treatment on the court. But instead of all of that, instead of patting her on the back, they stabbed her in it. And they are repeatedly stabbing her in it. And they are doing their best to end Caitlin Clark's career. All of this stuff on the court adds up, folks. It is not about one devastating blow that causes an injury that ends her career. It's a lot of these things over time that accumulate to where she can no longer perform as a basketball player. It is sad. It is pathetic. I look at the WNBA and I am truly and completely disgusted with what I see in how they have treated Caitlin Clark. Let's hope it changes. Fingers crossed. She is a generational talent. Look, I'll end with this. The state of the current NBA right now, I would rather watch Caitlin Clark being Caitlin Clark than I would an NBA game. Although I am excited for my Sixers this fall with that steal they just taken Jaylen Brown from the Celtics, but that's a conversation for another day. If you have enjoyed this, I truly do appreciate y'all being here. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video, get the word out there. It only grows because of you, and it does matter to me. I will talk to you later.